Mark Cuban. Giant matchmaker, Mark Cuban. The recipe for disaster, Mark Cuban. One cog in a large machine, agriculture and innovation. And the rest is history. A small group of people that really cared and would do things in their own time, with their own dollars to bring people together.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm so excited to kick it off. This is not just a new season, it's a new season in a new place, which is Calgary. I'm super excited and I look forward to learn more about people like you who are building the ecosystem and who are very active in the ecosystem for the past, 15, 20 years?
More years than I want to remember.
So tell me please about your background and how did you end up in the innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, it was a bit of an accident. I was kind of thinking back just in preparation for our conversation today about how I got into this space. And, I guess I was always kind of an entrepreneur in elementary school and high school. And when I was trying to make the decision as to what I want to do in university, all my friends are going into commerce. It's like, well, I guess maybe commerce is for me, but I was kind of interested in computers at the time. So there was a brand new degree that the University of Saskatchewan was offering called Development of Information Systems, which was half commerce and half comp sci. And so I thought, this looks interesting, and I applied into it. And I had no idea that sort of blend of business and tech was going to kind of help dictate the next 20 years of my career. But looking back on it, it's one of those happy accidents where if I hadn't have gone into that and had that computer and business background, I don't know what I'd be doing today.
Interesting. I counted you have 17 jobs on your LinkedIn profile. You don't look that old and you don't look like you're a job hopper. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's very interesting to have so many experiences. So I'm just thinking if you can, name 3 the most exciting jobs among those 17, what would it be?
17? I don't even think I've gone through and added up all the LinkedIn jobs I've listed there. There's probably even a few I haven't listed there as well. But the top 3. Well, I would say that the first job, I'll go all the way back and try to go in chronological order. Mm-hmm. The oldest job that I had that I think was really helped me kind of get on this path was when I was working while in university at the Bank of Nova Scotia. And I'd started kind of in grade 12 and I was working there through university, and it was, this is where you can calculate exactly how old I am. This was when Y2K was around the corner and the bank was scrambling to try to get prepared for the impending doom that was going to come with Y2K and all the computers crashing. So I actually just, again, by chance, happened to get, asked because of my role in commerce and the development of information systems. My boss at the time was looking for someone to lead the Y2K conversion, where we were updating software, updating processes, and she thought it would be great for me, because I have sort of business and computers on the go, that I would jump in and kind of play a leadership role under her, helping to implement all these Y2K changes. So that was like my first kind of really cool experience to see, how a big organization goes through a very rapid change, new software, eliminating old software, changing processes across, this is all across Canada and the Bank of Nova Scotia. So that was a really, really cool project that, again, was really serendipitous that I got invited to do that while I was, in university, kind of taking that business and tech background type of programming. So I'd say that was like the oldest cool job that I had. The next one, I would jump ahead to my role with Ethor, where Ethor was one of the startups. I was not a founder, but I was one of the early employees that joined Gary, the original founder, to drive the business forward. And I mean, that one, there's so many experiences I could share that make it one of my favorite 3 jobs that I've had. But I think the coolest thing about it was, we were raising some money, and in one of the rounds while I was there, we actually wound up taking some investment from Mark Cuban, who at the time, I think he's still pretty relevant today. Everyone knows Mark Cuban, but back then he was it, and so that was a big feather in our caps to say that we had some investment from Mark Cuban. But in reality, we only had a few calls. At least I was only on a few calls with Mark. It was all of his minions that were doing the due diligence and wanting to rip apart our financial forecasts and re-engineer our strategies. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience, and kind of cool to be able to say that I once had Mark Cuban as an investor in one of the companies I was involved in. And then honestly, I know this sounds very self-serving, but I would say the third role that I'm really enjoying and really excited to be in is this one. And so having the opportunity to jump into a program that is being run by an organization like Innovate Calgary and Economic Development Lethbridge, and have an opportunity to create a real impact here in Alberta is something that I'm really enjoying. 4.5 months in. It's been a great 4.5 months, and I think we're just getting started.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be talking about ElevateIP, right, and the challenges that you experience now. But let's get back to your experiences, right? So you have both corporate experiences and entrepreneurial, right? And some of them happen actually at the same time in parallel. And that people say that if you want to build successful business, you need to be 100% doing that, right? So how did you shuffle that, right? So where was that line where you were kind of still allocating time working for the company and building your venture at the same time?
Yeah, that is one of those things that you hear often, in the entrepreneurial space. It's like, well, I want to see you 100% dedicated to this. And investors talk about it, accelerators talk about it. And I get it, because ultimately, they're investing in you. They're trusting you, and they're expecting you to do everything in your power to make that job that startup a success. But I kind of disagree with that way of thinking, and here's the nuance of why I disagree. I think that every good entrepreneur should have a few different ideas or potential things that they are kicking around, sort of ideating on, at any given time. And most entrepreneurs, when you talk to them, they don't just have one thing they're working on. They're working on, this is my main thing, but I've got these other ideas I'm working on. And so I think that, as an entrepreneur, you need to be working on several different things, because you never know which one is going to get traction, which one is going to actually start, gaining momentum and become that thing that you are now focused 100% on. And so, I think in the early days or in the early ideation and early, when you're trying to discover, what your customers' needs are and can you really solve them? Is there a business that can be built here? I think it's totally great, and I encourage entrepreneurs to have a few different things that they're working on. But I also think you have to be disciplined enough that when one thing starts really taking off, you've got to be willing to put down, or at least kind of reallocate your bandwidth to those things that are taking off. Because where I don't disagree with that way of thinking is I don't think you should have an entrepreneur that's building 3 startups at once. Like that, I feel like is a recipe for disaster, because you will never get that full commitment from investors and from partners if you're not fully committed. But I do think earlier on, until you find that thing that's starting to gain traction, if you can be working a full-time job and in evenings and weekends, testing ideas or getting a small business going, that's the best way to incubate it, reduces your risk. And if it starts taking off, then you have to make that hard decision to quit the current job you're in and focus on that, or keep pushing it forward, and maybe it's not the right opportunity for you to quit and focus your attention on.
Absolutely, this is a great point. One of the jobs that you also had in your portfolio, right, that was the director of Alberta at Plug and Play, and it feels like it's a great opportunity to move a needle in the startup space with the huge brand and company behind. tell me more about that job and why did you decide to leave?
Yeah, it was not an easy decision. Actually, one of the hardest decisions I've had to make in my entire professional life. But Plug and Play was an amazing experience. So, Plug and Play, global Silicon Valley based accelerator, really, really cool model in the sense that, Plug and Play is a corporate innovation accelerator. So, the customer of Plug and Play are the big established companies that exist out there today. And this is something that I oftentimes explain to entrepreneurs. It's not a bad thing, but the entrepreneurs and the startups that work in Plug and Play's programs are actually the product. Plug and Play is a giant matchmaker that gets buy-in from the big corporations, their innovation teams that are out looking for solutions, and then leverages their 800-person network across, I think it's probably over 70 countries now, to go out and find the best companies that are solving that problem, and they bring them back, do a little bit of light due diligence, and present them to those corporations. So, it's a brilliant model. It's simple, it's elegant, and it's really efficient. And obviously, Plug and Play has grown to be one of the biggest tech accelerators in the world because of that. But I think for me, the challenge I had is that I'm really, I'm always in the corner of the underdog. I'm always supporting, the small up and coming entrepreneurs who are trying to disrupt the big organizations. And, I often found myself when I was at Plug and Play, wanting to spend more time helping that entrepreneur, let's polish that pitch a little bit. I've got a lot of background. A lot of the businesses I've been involved in and the startups have always had, some element of customer engagement, whether it's direct sales or partnerships or BD. So I always want to jump in and, I think I could help you here. And the challenge at Plug and Play is that, we really, in the role that I was in as director, one of the directors here in Alberta, my job wasn't to spend time working with entrepreneurs and coaching and advising. I was really about building the team and driving the business model and creating a sustainable model here in Alberta. And so as time wore on, there was nothing that changed or that, I hated about the role. It was really just, I was longing to get back to be working more with entrepreneurs, supporting them, providing resources to them and helping drive them forward. So, I'm also a builder, so I love getting in and setting up and figuring out new programs or new companies. And I found, Plug and Play, again, it's a big organization. I was one cog in a large machine. And once we had our model up and running, we built the team. We had an amazing team, and they're still with Plug and Play today, most of them. I started kind of being open to other opportunities, and ElevateIP Alberta was kind of serendipitously came across my desk, and the rest is history.
I love that story. I just found out when I was looking for getting ready for the interview, I found out that you already used to work for Innovate Calgary a long time ago, and that was like 15 years ago.
I guess see a lot of gray in this beard.
And I assume, and that's true, right? It was a very different ecosystem at that time. So what do you think, maybe 2 or 3 things that changed dramatically since then?
Yeah, well, even, Innovate Calgary in itself 15 years ago was a big change. So I actually was working at Calgary Technologies, Inc., and Calgary Technologies, Inc. and University Technologies International merged to create what is now known as Innovate Calgary. And then, a few years later, there was actually the split, which led to Platform Calgary and Innovate Calgary kind of existing in the ecosystem here. So I think that, that merger is right around the time when I left to go back and jump into a startup that I had been working with. So, I didn't spend a lot of time working under the Innovate Calgary brand back then, but yeah, so, a lot has changed, and I think, if we look at the 3 biggest shifts that I would kind of describe over the last 15 years here in Calgary related to the tech ecosystem, the first one would definitely be the macroeconomic environment. the zeitgeist around startups and entrepreneurship. 15 years ago, if you told somebody you were an entrepreneur, people would laugh and they would say, oh, so you're just between jobs, right? Being an entrepreneur was something you did when you were unemployed. And so, those days have changed dramatically. Nowadays, the popularity of shows like Silicon Valley and the popularity of, science and technology and startups has obviously changed, a lot in 15 years. So I think nowadays it's cool to start a company, and the next generation of kids that are in high school and in university, becoming an entrepreneur or starting a business is actually a viable career option that your parents won't get mad at you for. Well, maybe some parents, depending on your parents, some might still get mad, but or not be happy with that. They want you to be a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer. But I do think that becoming a startup founder is not just cool; it's actually viable now, and so that's one of the big shifts. The other big shift actually kind of relates to Innovate Calgary is that I think 15 years ago, there was a lot of siloed work being done in the ecosystem. So you didn't have the university and the downtown community working together. You had at that time sort of Calgary Technologies Inc. and then now what has become Platform. We're all kind of disconnected, and nobody was doing it on purpose. That was just the nature of the ecosystem back then. So it led to kind of fractured support for entrepreneurs. The governments weren't clear, if I fund this organization, do I need to also fund this one, or are they working together? And so, back 10, 15 years ago, I think that disconnection across the community was holding us back from the potential. And now if you fast forward to today, you see so much more collaboration, you see so much more partnerships, you see organizations like the Calgary Innovation Coalition have sprung up to try to help bring together, and just every city, I think, and every region has an organization like the Calgary Innovation Coalition, but specifically here in Calgary, they're here trying to make connections, build bridges, look at partnerships, and kind of ensure that everybody is working collaboratively together. So I really think that efficient use of the resources that we have has been a game changer, because it's also led to the government being able to understand a little bit more about who's who is, and it allows them to, look at programs and say, okay, we recognize there's a gap here. We know all the players that are working and they're collaborating together, but no one's actually addressing that. So let's create some funding. Let's create a new program. And it's not just government, it's industry itself. You see entrepreneurs starting, new startups and social enterprises that are helping to build a community. So I think that organization and coordination has been huge. And don't ask me how it happened, because I have no idea. We went from disconnected, not really working together, but I think it's been an evolution, and I think there's a lot of people that have worked countless hours over the last 15 years to bring everybody together and to get that collaboration happening. And then I think the last kind of thing I would highlight that I think has really changed is that similar to my first point, back 15 years ago, the innovation and tech community was really seen as this small, nice to have group of eccentric, people trying to change the world, and that's fun over there, but the real business of Alberta is energy and agriculture, and that was a focus for everything that we did when we were talking, promoting ourselves. It was all about our key industries, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's important. Those are the big revenue drivers, the big industries that help drive prosperity in our province. But that's changing, and that's what I think is really different today now, is that the innovation community is not seen as this tangential industry that is not really significant. We're seen as that engine that's going to help propel Oh, someone's not happy. I don't know if the microphone picked up on that, but anyway, the innovation community is really seen as an engine that's going to help drive us and drive our province forward in the future. Not on its own, and I know people often get caught up in this. Is it energy or innovation? Is it agriculture or innovation? And to me, the whole or argument or the or conversation is just rooted in fallacy. It's an and conversation. We should be doing energy and technology, agriculture and innovation. And if we look at that as our innovation community being complementary to all the core strengths that we have in Alberta, that's how we drive things forward. And I think that is really, truly at all levels, not just within government. I mean, I think that is true, though. We've got municipal, provincial, and federal government that's looking at the innovation community that way now, but also as a community ourselves, thinking about, if you're building a startup, how do I work with the energy industry? Because I've got a solution that I think can really impact companies that are in that space, or leveraging the farmers and the agriculture industry we have here. How can I build a company that's going to help those other people in my community and use tech as that enabler? So I really think that is, nothing's perfect today, but that's really one of the big things that's changed. Is because 15 years ago innovation was just this little shiny object over to the side, and let's just stick to the real business of energy and agriculture and the core strengths of Alberta. But I'm happy to say that I feel like that's changed quite a bit.
Perfect. Let's move to your current chapter, which is ElevateIP, and you already start talking a little bit about it. So for those who don't know what ElevateIP is, if you can introduce briefly. I've heard that bit many times, but there are so many other entrepreneurs that have to hear this story, right? And why ElevateIP as the program is so crucial for startup ecosystem. And if you can throw probably some numbers just to show that importance and relevance of the program.
I'm happy to, yeah. So ElevateIP Alberta is the program's full name here in Alberta. ElevateIP, though, is actually a federal program that ISED, so Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, launched as part of their National Intellectual Property Strategy that they unveiled in 2018. So we are sort of a program within a program. There's 4 other organizations across Canada that are running the ElevateIP programming in those different regions across Canada. So some of them are called ElevateIP with a province. Some of them have changed the name and created something different, but essentially it all stems from ISED, which is our funding partner, and that has really enabled this opportunity. So as I was mentioning, the National Intellectual Property Strategy is something that they unveiled in 2018. And the reason why IP, I think, is so popular was highlighted by this study. So they looked at Canada as a national sort of ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem. And they were trying to understand, what are the things that are holding back Canadian startups? And, we've all heard it. People talk about how Canadian startups, exit too early, they raise money at lower valuations, we have fewer, unicorns compared to other regions on a per capita basis. So, all of these are symptoms of an underlying problem, and IP is not the entire problem, but it is a very big part of that problem, because what we've seen, and this was highlighted in a conference I was at just recently this week, that the number of patents that are held, Canadian patents that are held by Canadian corporations, has been in steady decline going back all the way to 2005. And I believe it was 2005, 56% of all Canadian patents were held by Canadian companies. And now I believe that number has shrunk to 18%. And so what that means is that, and I hope I got my numbers right. If not, we'll have to add some comments to this video. But the reality is, what that means is there's just more non-Canadian companies that are investing in and owning intellectual property that's being generated in Canada. And that in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you think about it from the prosperity of us as a country, that actually is a bad thing, because if you control the IP, you control the market for that product, you control where that revenue goes once it's generated, and you can control how that IP is used or not used to create prosperity for Canadians. So, it is a much bigger problem than I think even I had realized before I'd taken this role on. But I also think if we kind of zoom back into what does it mean for entrepreneurs, I think that it means entrepreneurs are at a disadvantage when trying to raise money, especially outside of Canada, because we don't have the patents and the patent portfolios that some of the American competitors or American partners that we may want to work with have. And that can sometimes prevent you as a Canadian startup founder from selling into a market or expanding your business or even getting investment in countries outside of Canada. So I think that's kind of the bigger picture, the why behind this program. In terms of the program itself, it's a 4-year program, and so the program runs through until March 31st, 2026. And our mission and vision really is to help Albertan startups become more IP savvy and to take more steps to protect their intellectual property. And we're doing that through a funding program where we have dollars, again, from ISED, so federal dollars, to help support entrepreneurs in both learning and then building intellectual property strategies to ensure they have a strong plan to drive their business forward. And then once they have that strong plan and they have that IP strategy, we have dollars that they can unlock to actually take protection. So implement patents, trademarks, copyrights, or whatever they need to do in order to protect their business and help them move forward. So that's really the funding side, but we're also trying to increase the capacity of our ecosystem here in Alberta when it comes to intellectual property. So we really want to help every advisor, coach, and mentor in Alberta, if they're not already proficient and savvy when it comes to intellectual property, we're running workshops and training to help them learn more so they can be better coaches, advisors, and mentors. And we're also collaborating with all the business accelerators and incubators across the province to help them do more coaching and to do more support for entrepreneurs to start thinking about intellectual property early on in their business.
We talk a lot about the ecosystem, right, in Calgary, and it looks like it's growing, and it's fact. There are numbers, right, they don't lie. Calgary is climbing different lists, closer to the top, which is exciting. There is definitely momentum. So what makes Calgary ecosystem, startup/innovation ecosystem, vibrant, dynamic? And if you think that this growth is sustainable?
Yeah, those are two big questions. So the short answer is yes, I do believe that it's sustainable. And I think that the other question is not, I wish I had such a short, easy answer for. But I think that there's a number of factors that come into play when you think about what makes a vibrant startup ecosystem or innovation community. The first is you need to have a critical mass of people that actually care and want to do things and want to build and be part of the community. Even 15 years ago, the community was small, but there was a small group of people that really cared and would do things in their own time with their own dollars to bring people together. And so I think, in Alberta, we are, I think rewind back 100 years, Alberta was built by entrepreneurs. So we have that entrepreneurial DNA here, and what I think is going to continue to drive that growth is that we keep seeing that small core community of innovative people growing, I shouldn't say innovative people, that small community of innovators, people who are thinking about innovation, who are building companies, that continues to grow, and as it grows, it creates gravity, it creates a pull. And that pull is now, I feel, expanding and extending out to include some of those people who have backgrounds and maybe never had an opportunity to be part of the innovation community, they're now seeing what's going on, and they're being invited in, and the community is very open and inviting and welcoming to new people who want to get to know what's going on in the innovation space. And I think that openness and that willingness to bring people in is what's continuing to drive the growth. And I use some examples, like I know there's a lot of, again, we'll have to fact check this one, but I'm pretty sure, and the information might be a few years out of date, but at some point in recent history, I believe it was Calgary had one of the highest densities of millionaires per capita in all of Canada.
Oh, wow.
And so that's an interesting stat. Again, someone will fact check me, but maybe we'll do it ourselves. That stat has been talked about by a few different people in the community. When we talk about how difficult it can be to raise money as a startup founder here in Alberta, over the last 15 years, that is one of the challenges. We've got all this wealth around us, but very little of it is actually investing in the sort of startup scene. But that's changing now, and we're starting to see family offices, the next generation, the people who are, men and women now in their 20s, 30s, coming out of university, they're taking over the reins of their family businesses or of their family offices. And they now see technology, innovation, social enterprise as where they want to find meaning in the work, and how they want to continue the work that their parents and grandparents started, and continue creating more wealth for them and their family while doing good in the community as well. And so I think that's just one sort of anecdotal story that I think is really exciting, that speaks to kind of what's happening here in Alberta as the community, the innovation community grows and pulls in more and more of the broader community.
On this positive note, let's wrap it up, this interview. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for finding time in your very busy schedule. I look forward to see ElevateIP grows and impact and support more entrepreneurs in Alberta and beyond.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.